Big thanks to Lit RPG Reads, and of course to Paul Bello.
Fine fellow.
Fine feller indeed. For sending this awesome article our way. It's all about building a cohesive D&D party, which honestly got me thinking about a recent game I ran where things went just spectacularly off the rails.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Picture this. 5 adventurers, fresh-faced and ready for glory, standing at the entrance of a crumbling tomb. I describe this scene all spooky and atmospheric and ask, what do you do?
Classic setup.
Right. But what I did not expect was for the party's paladin, bless his heart, to immediately declare, I kick down the door and charge in yelling a challenge to any evil lurking within.
Oh no, the classic Leroy Jenkins move.
Exactly. Now, I could have tried to gently steer him towards a more cautious approach.
Sure.
But where's the fun in that? So I let him have his glorious, if somewhat reckless moment.
I can already see where this is going.
It gets better. The door splinters. He bellows his challenge and promptly triggers a series of deadly traps that I, in a fit of inspiration, had decided to add to the tomb's entrance.
You're cruel, DM.
Maybe just a little. The session devolved into hilarious chaos from there. The rogue was frantically disarming traps while dodging swinging blades. The wizard was trying to conjure a shield while also keeping their spellbook dry from the conveniently placed water trap. And the poor cleric was just trying to keep everyone alive amidst the mayhem. It was a memorable session for sure, but made me realize how important it is to have a party that not only has a balance of roles, but also understands how to work together.
I think we've all been there as players or DMs.
Right. And that's where this article from Lit RPG Reads comes in. It talks about this idea of the D&D party as an orchestra, with each player as an instrument and the DM as the conductor. Well, that was a really cool way of looking at it. What are your thoughts?
It is a powerful analogy. You've got your soaring violins representing the elegant spellcasting of a wizard. The booming percussion section embodies the raw strength of a barbarian. And just like in an orchestra, you need all the instruments working in harmony to create a truly captivating performance. One instrument playing a solo can be impressive, but it's the interplay between different sounds, different melodies, that creates a truly rich and memorable experience.
That's such a good point.
And it's the same with a D&D party. You need a mix of classes, skills, and personalities to create a dynamic and engaging game. It's not just about having one powerhouse character dominating the spotlight. It's about finding those moments where the different party members can shine, where their abilities complement each other, and where they work together to overcome challenges.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of those different roles, the article goes on to talk about this party framework matrix, which I found really intriguing.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It breaks down those classic D&D roles. The tank, the healer, DPS, utility face, and scout. But it goes beyond just defining what they do. It focuses on how those roles interact and support each other. For example, they talked about how a tank isn't just about soaking up damage. They're also about creating space for the DPS to do their thing, or protecting the healer so they can keep everyone patched up. It's about understanding that each role contributes to the party's success in a different way. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a crucial insight for any dungeon master. You see, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking about D&D in terms of individual characters and their stats, but the real magic happens when those characters come together as a team. This party framework matrix sounds like a really valuable tool for DMs to analyze their party's composition and identify potential strengths and weaknesses. Right. Imagine, for instance, you have a party with a really strong tank, a skilled healer, and a couple of powerful DPS characters. On paper, that sounds like a solid lineup, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But what if they're lacking a face character? Someone who can smooth talk their way through social encounters, gather information, or maybe even persuade their way out of a fight. Suddenly, that party, despite its combat prowess, might find themselves struggling in situations that require diplomacy or subterfuge.
Makes you think.
And that's where this matrix can be so helpful. It encourages DMs to think about the party as a whole, as a system where each part is interconnected and interdependent.
That's a great point. It's not just about having the best characters in each role. It's about how those roles fit together and complement each other. And I'm thinking back to my chaotic tomb entrance scenario, and I'm realizing that maybe part of the problem was that everyone was trying to play the hero, so to speak. No one was really thinking about how their actions might affect the rest of the party. So how can a DM encourage that kind of teamwork and collaboration, especially when you've got players who are really attached to their characters' individual goals and motivations? I'm curious to hear your take on that.
That's where things get really interesting. Because it's a delicate balance, right? You want to give players the freedom to create unique characters with their own ambitions and desires. But you also want to foster a sense of teamwork and shared purpose. One way to do this is to build those collaborative elements into the campaign itself. Instead of presenting players with a series of disconnected quests, try to create scenarios where their character's personal goals naturally align with the needs of the party.
Oh, I like that.
For example, let's say one player is playing a rogue who's obsessed with finding a legendary treasure. Another player is playing a paladin who's sworn to protect the innocent. Instead of having those goals feel separate, you could weave them together by revealing that the legendary treasure is actually a powerful artifact that's needed to defeat a villain who's terrorizing the countryside.
Clever.
Suddenly, those two seemingly disparate goals are working in tandem. And the players naturally find themselves collaborating because their characters' individual motivations are aligned with the larger objective.
I like that. It's about finding those points of intersection where individual desires and the needs of the group overlap. It's not about forcing players to abandon their characters' motivations, but rather about showing them how those motivations can be fulfilled in a way that also benefits the party as a whole.
That's a really clever way to encourage collaboration. And it makes me think about how we often approach problem solving in real life, too. It's about finding those win-win scenarios where everyone's needs are met and where individual success contributes to the collective good.
Exactly.
But let's be real. Even with the best laid plans and perfectly aligned goals, conflicts are bound to arise in any D&D party. You've got different personalities, different play styles, and sometimes those clash. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how to handle those inevitable conflicts in a way that doesn't derail the game. That's a topic that deserves its own deep dive. But I can offer some insights based on what we've discussed so far. The key, I believe, is to shift our perspective on conflict. Instead of seeing it as something to be avoided or suppressed, we can view it as an opportunity for growth, for character development, and for creating even more engaging and memorable stories. Think about it. Some of the most compelling narratives in literature, film, and even video games are driven by conflict. It's the clash of personalities, the struggle for power, the tension between opposing forces. That keeps us on the edge of our seats. Why should D&D be any different?
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. It's about embracing those moments of tension and friction as a way to add depth and complexity to the game. And I think that's especially important in a collaborative storytelling experience like D&D, where the players are actively shaping the narrative alongside the DM. I remember a campaign I ran where two players, one playing a noble paladin, the other a cunning rogue, constantly butted heads. Their characters had fundamentally different worldviews and approaches to problem solving, which led to some hilarious arguments and tense standoffs, but it also created some of the most memorable moments in the campaign. I'm curious to hear your take on how to harness that kind of inter-party conflict and turn it into something that enriches the game rather than detracts from it.
There are many ways to do that, and it often depends on the specific personalities involved and the nature of the conflict. But here are a few strategies that I found helpful. First, it's important to establish a clear understanding among the players that conflict, when handled respectfully and in character, can actually enhance the game. This might involve having a pre-game discussion about player comfort levels with conflict and setting boundaries around what kind of behavior is acceptable at the table. Second, you can use those conflicts as opportunities for role-playing. Encourage players to step into their character's shoes and think about how they would react in a given situation. Would they try to persuade the other character to see their point of view? Would they resort to threats or intimidation? Would they simply agree to disagree and go their separate ways?
Interesting.
By framing these conflicts as in-character interactions, you can create opportunities for players to explore the complexities of their characters' personalities and relationships, and to add layers of depth and nuance to the story.
So it's about creating a safe space for those conflicts to play out in a way that feels authentic to the characters in the narrative.
Yeah.
It's not about suppressing those differences, but rather about channeling them into something productive and entertaining.
Precisely.
This has been a really fascinating exploration of the dynamics of a D&D party. We've talked about the importance of role balance, the power of collaborative storytelling, and the potential of conflict to enrich the game. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on handling conflict in a D&D party? Have you had any experiences where conflict led to unexpected and positive outcomes? Share your stories and insights in the comments below. And of course, a big thank you again to Paul Bello, fine fellow, for suggesting this thought-provoking topic.
Hear, hear, fine fellow, indeed. It's fascinating how something as seemingly simple as a game can teach us so much about ourselves and how we interact with others. And as you mentioned, these lessons about conflict resolution and collaboration aren't limited to the tabletop. They have real-world applications in our work, our relationships, and even in how we navigate societal challenges.
I completely agree. It's like D&D is this amazing microcosm of human interaction. We create these fantastical worlds and characters, but the core dynamics of teamwork, communication, and conflict resolution are all there. amplified and maybe a little more dramatic.
Precisely. And by exploring these dynamics in a safe and structured environment like a game, we can gain valuable insights that we can then apply to our real lives. For example, the concept of aligning goals, which we touched on earlier, is crucial in any collaborative endeavor, whether you're working on a team project at work, trying to make decisions with your family, or even just trying to coordinate plans with friends. Understanding everyone's motivations and finding those points of shared purpose can make all the difference.
It's funny you mentioned that. I recently had a situation at work where we were trying to launch a new product, and the team was just completely at odds. The marketing folks wanted to focus on one message. The developers were pushing for different features. And the sales team had their own ideas about pricing and distribution. It's like everyone was speaking a different language.
I've just been there.
And it wasn't until we sat down and really talked through everyone's goals and concerns that we were able to find some common ground and come up with a plan that everyone could get behind. It was like we suddenly had that shared quest objective that gave everyone a sense of purpose and direction.
That's a perfect example of how these D&D principles can translate to real-world situations, and it highlights the importance of clear communication and active listening. In D&D, you can't just assume that everyone is on the same page. You have to constantly communicate, share information, and make sure that everyone understands the plan and their role in it.
Yeah, and sometimes that means having those difficult conversations, calling out when something isn't working, or advocating for your own needs and perspectives. It's not always easy, especially when you're dealing with different personalities and communication styles, but it's essential for building trust and ensuring that everyone feels heard and valued.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the topic of diversity, which is something we value in D&D and something that enriches our real-world experiences as well.
I've always loved how D&D allows you to step into the shoes of characters who are completely different from yourself. You can be a brave warrior, a cunning rogue, a wise wizard, or even a talking badger with a penchant for thievery.
Now that's a character I'd like to see.
And by embracing those different perspectives, you gain a deeper appreciation for the diversity of human experience. It's like a reminder that everyone has their own unique story, their own strengths and weaknesses, and their own way of seeing the world.
And just like in a D&D party, that diversity of perspectives can be a source of strength and innovation in real life. When you bring together people with different backgrounds, experiences, and ways of thinking, you create a richer and more dynamic environment where new ideas can flourish and problems can be approached from multiple angles.
I think that's a really important point, especially in today's world where we're facing such complex and interconnected challenges. We need to be able to work together to leverage our collective wisdom and creativity and to find solutions that benefit everyone, not just a select few.
And that's where those D&D lessons about collaboration, communication, and respecting different viewpoints become so crucial. It's about creating spaces where everyone feels safe to share their ideas, where disagreements are seen as opportunities for growth rather than threats, and where we work together towards a common goal, even if we don't always agree on the best way to get there.
I love that. It's like taking those skills we hone in our D&D games and applying them to the real world. To our communities, our workplaces, and our relationships. It's about building a world where everyone can roll for initiative and contribute to the adventure, regardless of their character class or backstory.
And just like in D&D, there will be challenges, there will be setbacks, and there will be times when we need to regroup and strategize. But if we approach those challenges with the same spirit of collaboration, creativity, and maybe even a little bit of that D&D humor, we can overcome any obstacle and create a truly epic story.
As we're talking, I keep thinking about how D&D at its heart is about storytelling. It's about creating these narratives together, about weaving together threads of individual action and shared experience into something that feels both personal and universal. And that power of storytelling, that ability to connect with others through shared narratives, is something that transcends the game itself. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how D&D and role-playing games in general tap into that fundamental human need for storytelling, and how those skills can be used to create more meaningful connections and richer experiences in our everyday lives.
That's a fascinating question, and one that gets to the core of what makes these games so compelling. You see, humans are storytelling creatures. It's how we make sense of the world, how we share our experiences, and how we connect with one another. From the ancient myths and legends passed down through generations to the modern-day narratives we consume through books, films, and video games, stories shape our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world.
It's amazing how we started this deep dive talking about trap-filled tombs and rogue paladins, and we ended up having this profound conversation about the power of storytelling and the importance of empathy. It just goes to show that you never know where a D&D session or a deep dive for that matter, will take you.
It's a testament to the power of play, I think.
Why?
We often associate play with childhood, with something frivolous and inconsequential. But as we've discussed, play can be a powerful tool for learning, for growth, and for connecting with others in a meaningful way.
I couldn't agree more. And it makes me think about how we can bring more of that playful spirit into our everyday lives. What if we approached our work, our relationships, and even our challenges with a bit more curiosity, a bit more creativity, and a bit more of that willingness to embrace the unexpected that we bring to our D&D games?
Imagine the possibilities. What if, instead of dreading that Monday morning meeting, we saw it as an opportunity to embark on a new quest with our colleagues? What if, instead of getting bogged down in the day-to-day grind, we looked for those moments of magic, those opportunities for connection and adventure that are hidden in plain sight?
I love that. It's about shifting our perspective,
Hmm.
about seeing the world as a place full of possibilities rather than limitations. And it reminds me of something you said earlier about how D&D encourages us to step into the shoes of others, to see the world through different lenses. I think that's one of the most valuable lessons we can take from these games. And something that's so important in today's world, where we're constantly bombarded with information and opinions that reinforce our own biases. D&D forces us to break out of those echo chambers and to engage with perspectives that are different from our own.
It's about cultivating that sense of curiosity, that willingness to step outside our comfort zones and to truly listen to what others have to say, even if we don't always agree with them. And it's about recognizing that everyone has their own story, their own struggles, and their own triumphs.
And sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that challenge our assumptions, that make us question our beliefs,
Yeah.
and that ultimately help us grow as individuals and as a society.
Beautifully put. It's about embracing those moments of discomfort, those opportunities to learn and to expand our understanding of the world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you, our listeners, to think about how you can bring more of that D&D spirit into your lives.
Yeah.
How can you be more playful, more curious, more empathetic? How can you use the power of storytelling to connect with others, to build bridges of understanding, and to create a world that's a little bit more magical, a little bit more adventurous, and a little bit more kind? And of course, a final shout out to Paul Bello, fine fellow, for suggesting this incredible topic. Until next time, keep rolling those dice, keep telling those stories, and keep adventuring bravely through life.
And your journeys be filled with wonder, your companions be true, and your stories be epic.